You remember when you got her? You had hours and hours to just drive and dream. You spent your Saturdays fixing whatever needed fixing just to keep her running right. 20 years later, isn't it time you two got reacquainted? When you're ready, we're here. Because at LMC Truck, we know that while time may have passed, your passion for her never faded. Get her back on the road where she and you belong.
Now you're watching Gearz, brought to you by LMC Truck. Keep them on the road.
Hey, welcome to Gearz. You know, anytime you see an engine and a transmission hanging on a hoist and a chassis somewhere in the vicinity, well, that's a pretty good assumption that they go together. And in this case, you'd be right. These two do go together. But if you're wondering what body goes down on this combination, well, we need to bring you up to speed on what we're doing. Check it out. The 100th anniversary of any company is a big deal, but for Cornwell Tools, it went beyond that. Since their tools have been used in the building and the maintenance of millions of vehicles over the last 100 years, it was only fitting to tie them in with one of the most technologically advanced vehicles ever built, the SR-71 Blackbird. Conceived by Lockheed Martin in the late 50s and put into service in the early 60s, the Blackbird was a mechanical marvel that to this day has never been equaled. Capable of cruising at a blistering speed of Mach 3.3 at an altitude of 85,000 feet, it was literally faster than a bullet flying at the edge of the atmosphere. Now, what was it doing flying at that height and speed? Well, it was taking reconnaissance photos of things it shouldn't see in places it shouldn't be. That's right, it was a spy plane, the ultimate spy plane, and it was never shot down, captured, or outrun in over 30 years of service. It was, and still is, the best of the best.
You can see the rudders are canted in some, it's so that the radar would bounce off the rudders away from the receiver of the radar. And that was another reason for the chine, the flared area along the side. So radar would, instead of being reflected directly back to the receiver, a lot of it would be deflected in another direction. So that chine was early stealth technology.
Now, since there is no question that some of the crews that worked on the SR-71 used Cornwell tools, I figured the best way to recognize that is to build the SR-71 Rapid Tool Express, the world's fastest tool delivery truck, and do it out of a '59 Ford panel. That's what this drivetrain and this chassis is going under. Now, if you followed the buildup of this so far, you saw the disassembly of the truck. Then the replacement of the stock chassis with a new Roadster shop chassis. And finally, the introduction of the new John Cossey SR-71 engine and heads that pushed a big block Ford to over 1,000 horsepower on pump gas, thanks to the help of a blower shop 871 Huffer and a Scott slot injection. Now, with a heavy-duty transmission bolted behind it from Performance Automatic, we are ready to fit this drivetrain into a chassis that was completely designed by a computer. Bringing up the question, is it going to fit? Well, let's find out. And It fits like a glove. I mean, seriously, take a look at this. Over here on the passenger side, you got plenty of room for your starter. Same thing on the driver's side, plenty of room for the steering, the cross member, the steering rack, even the sway bar. It's a nice tight fit, but you got plenty of room. It even has the proper angles built into the motor mounts and the transmission mount based on the rake of your chassis to make sure that your drive shaft angles are right. This is why buying a replacement chassis from somebody like the Roadster Shop is so popular. This can save you hundreds of hours of fabrication and design work. Now, since we have the drive shaft in place, we're ready to move on to the exhaust. And on a project like this, it's going to have to look good, and it's going to have to flow like a mother to keep up with this supercharger. So we hooked up with our buddies at Stainless Works, and they got busy. Since high-quality stainless steel headers are a specialty at Stainless Works, the first thing they did was craft a set of headers for these new John Cossey SR-71 heads. Now, usually the idea behind headers is to tuck them down between the engine and the frame and then run the exhaust down through the center of the frame. The problem is, on a chassis like this, there's not a lot of room here, especially once you get the starter in and the cross members and the steering and the pedals and all that stuff. Fortunately, on these old Fords, you don't have to run the exhaust down through the center. You can run it on the outside of the frame rails because the body hangs low enough on the sides that you'll never see it. So, Stainless Works built the headers to exit through the truck inner fender and outside the frame rail. Next comes an intermediate pipe in 3-inch tubing along with the high-flowing mufflers. V-clamps were used throughout to prevent any leakage and provide easy disassembly. The next challenge was to get the exhaust pipe back between the frame rails so it would clear the rear tires and create the proper exit out the back. So, according to my directions, Stainless Works routed the pipe around the 4-link bracket, and then tailpipes were run over the rear end, around the fuel tank, and out the back. Finally, the exhaust will exit through the roll pan in the body with polished stainless steel tips. And you can imagine what that engine is going to sound like through a 3-inch pipe. Now, as far as the final finish on the exhaust system, you have a couple choices here. It's stainless steel, so you can brush it, or you can polish it, or you can put on a high-temperature coating, which is what we're going to do. But first, I'm going to grab a grinder here, and I'm going to finesse the pipes down to get rid of any burrs or welds or bending marks that I don't like. Then we'll take it apart, ship it to Jet Hot, and have them put on a cool coating. Hey, welcome back to Gearz, where we are in the process of showing you what it takes to put an aftermarket replacement chassis underneath your hot rod or muscle car. Because a lot of guys are offering these now, and it's a viable option on your project. Now, so far, as you can see, we have the engine and transmission in place, got the exhaust system in, and if you've gotten this far, you're going to be excited, you're going to want to tear it all apart and take it out and have it painted. But before you do that, you want to slow down and plan out the rest of the chassis. For example, what about your pedals? If those and the master cylinder are going to be mounted down in the chassis, now is the time to weld everything in place based on some measurements you should have already taken before you took the body off the frame. If you didn't do that, you need to back up, put the body back down on here, and get those measurements before you move forward. Another thing to consider are fuel lines and brake lines. How are those going to be run? Because now is the time to plan those and route them. For example, you can see this tab was welded on here, but with the way we've run our exhaust, we're going to have a little bit of an issue with the exhaust and the brake line. So we're going to move this tab over here. Now we have plenty of clearance around the exhaust. Finally, what about the fuel tank? Once again, this is something you need to plan out before you take the body off. For example, the stock fuel tank on a 59 Ford panel is on the side, and obviously we're not going to keep it there. So I designed a fuel tank that's being built by Rick's Tanks, and it's going to fit right here in the center and be accessed through a filler neck in the floor when you open the rear doors. And all of these dimensions are based off of the location of the frame rails, the exhaust, and the body. So you can see how important the pre-planning is if you want a vehicle that's going to fit together like it should. All right, with all this stuff taken care of, we have one more major hurdle we need to deal with: wheels and tires. Take a look. One of the hottest things going on today is using a modern Corvette suspension on hot rods and muscle cars. And this Corvette-based suspension from the Roadster shop is one of the best out there for handling and performance, and it requires the use of an 18-inch wheel to clear the brakes. The problem is the SR-71 Blackbird was not a slammed road course kind of vehicle. No, it was a straight line hot rod top speed aircraft. So it's imperative that the overall look of this panel truck reflects that. So I designed the truck to have a serious hot rod rake, which means that in the rear, we're going to be running these massive Mickey Thompson Sportsman SRs when I want to drive it every day. And then when I want to get particularly nasty, we're going to put on these even bigger Mickey Thompson ET Street Rs, which is basically a street legal wrinkle wall slick. Yeah, those things are going to hook up. Now, the problem is these tires both are right at 16 inches wide, 31 inches tall, and only available in a 15-inch rim. So we have 15-inch rim on the rear, 18-inch rim on the front. Not a good look. So we're going to solve that problem by making special wheels. And to do that, you need a special machine shop. Neely Precision burst into existence in 2001 from the fertile imagination of Dwayne Neely, who had a vision to build the ultimate machine shop.
Started out mechanic work years and years ago, and then when I got introduced to machine shop work was in '79. Well, I always wanted to try to mix the two, but man, it's a horse of a different color. It's, you know, machine building shops is completely different from this shop, and machine shops like the general machine shops, they don't do engine work. It's hard to mix the two together.
Standard machine work paid the bills in the beginning, but Dwayne was not content to just be another machine shop. He knew there was more to offer.
And I've seen right there in the first year, if I'm going to stay in this and make a go at it, I've got to have CNC equipment. I bought my first two CNCs at the same time, a lathe and a mill, and that's where it all started.
So, taking the plunge, he invested in not only state-of-the-art CNC machinery, but also the talent and personnel it takes to run it. And the result was spectacular.
I like the challenges that this trade has brought. I like doing stuff that guys say they don't want to do or can't do or don't know how to do. It's cool to do it, and it's cool to show people how to do it.
Anything that we can possibly manage to do that comes through that door, we do it. If we haven't never done it before, we put all our time and effort in it to where we can do it. We try not to turn down anything. And that's really what's got us where we're at today, is because we're just the go-to shop.
Not only do they whittle amazing parts out of all types of material for major corporations, but they also do one-off parts for hot rodders and car builders. You need a billet one-piece grill for an early Galaxy? They can do that. You need some custom wheels for a Riddler car? No problem. You need some special emblems or brackets or a 70 CUDA whittled out of aluminum for a trophy? Piece of cake. However, the best thing about Neely Precision is not just the incredible workmanship they do, but it's also how they treat each other and their customers.
If you're looking for a experienced CNC programmer, not just a guy that pushes the button, which those guys are just as important as the programmers, but if I need just somebody that's going to sit there and program and run a machine, it takes me roughly 6 months to find one good guy. Dwayne's always, he don't give stuff for free, he gives you opportunities. And I give Dwayne the thanks that he's gave me the opportunities to learn and grow in this trade, and that's where I am where I'm at. And to be honest, the way he's brought me into this trade and the way he's treated me reflects on how I treat these guys. And if I didn't have these guys behind me, beside me, and in front of me, we would be nothing. We would have nothing without this group of guys we have.
It kind of goes back to you get what you pay for. And we always, just like machine work out in the shop, we try to stay in the $65, $70 an hour range on most machine work and stuff. And that's pretty comparable to everybody in the area. But when you get into this stuff, like that grill out there, you know, you can't tell a man that you can do that for X amount of dollars on an hour, because you don't know how much it's going to take just to get it to where you could even put it on the machine, not even counting what it's going to take to make it. What I ask anybody to do when they come in, I said, just give me a target price.
So, when I needed a special set of wheels for the SR-71 project, Neely Precision were the guys that I knew could make it happen. The first step was to sit down with their designer and come up with a look that I liked. Using a classic Halla-brand as a starting point, he created a uniquely original design with a classic hot rod feel. However, the real magic in these wheels is in the bead lock that visually stretches the 15-inch wheel to make it look larger and reduces the 18-inch wheel to make it look smaller. The result are two wheels that look exactly the same size from the outside.
A hand-cut wheel, just like I said, and it's exactly what you want. It ain't like what somebody else, their take on it. It's what you want. It's just like, you know, the ones we're doing for you. I mean, who else would have dreamed up that wheel? But for what you was trying to put together, man, this thing is gonna fit that project perfect. And it's gonna blow some people away when they see the finished product.
From there, the pattern is transferred to the machines and the cutting and shaping begins. Once the centers are cut, they and the barrels are sent to Peter at Almost Chrome, where they're brushed and polished in preparation for welding.
Polishing is honestly a lot like paint and body work. It's 90% prep and 10% polishing. If your prep's not right, you're going back and doing it again. You can embarrass yourself very quickly if you don't prep things properly.
Then the last step will be to weld the centers into the barrels in the proper backspacing, and then put on the final coating, whether it's paint or polishing or whatever. So, the question is, do you think we've come up with a solution for the wheel diameter dilemma that so many of you are facing out there? Well, you're just gonna have to wait and see. Oh, I know you hate that!
Now, quick tip.
When you're working in a shop, one of the most frustrating situations that you can run into is trying to keep hardware in your socket when you stick it down into a tight place, because it falls out and you struggle with it and it drives you crazy. Now, there are some things you can stick down in there to help the situation, like grease or tape or even chewing gum. But there is a simpler, cleaner way to do this, and it involves a magnet, usually from an old speaker. Now, what you do is you take your tool, slide it down one side of the magnet, and now you have a magnetized tool that's going to make it a lot easier to keep track of your hardware. Now, if you want to demagnetize it, you just roll the tool down the opposite side of the magnet, and you're back to where you started. The best part is, this tip will work on any steel tools, from wrenches to punches to screwdrivers, even pliers. So you don't have to worry about dropping hardware anymore, and you don't have to mess with messy grease, tape, or gum. If you'd like to learn more tips to make your life easier in the shop, check out the tips page on the website.
And now, Parts Bin.
You know, it's a fact that most of us grew up reading automotive magazines like Hot Rod and Four Wheeler and Carcraft. Unfortunately, with the explosion of the internet, a lot of magazines have disappeared, and those that are still around are just a thin caricature of what they once were, both in quality and in content, leading many to think that the magazine is a dying thing. Well, fortunately, the guys at Wheel Hub magazine not only think the magazine is not dead, but that there's a market for a super high quality car book that features top-level photography and writing on premium paper and showcases some of the most amazing vehicles, people, and shops in the industry. And this is content you're not going to see in those other magazines, because Wheel Hub is not sponsor-driven, it's content-driven. Now, obviously, Wheel Hub is going to be a little bit more expensive than your typical supermarket magazine, but you get what you pay for. And if you're wondering where to get them, you can go right to Wheel Hub, or you can get them on our website.
What are you working on? Brought to you by Woodward Fabrication, selling quality metalworking equipment since 1966.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Gary Mees from Queen Creek, Arizona. And his project is a 1964 Jaguar MK2 sedan. Yeah, Jag. Now, he said he's owned this thing for 30 years, and he said it's been through different jobs, different wives, different states, different countries even, because Gary is originally from England. That's where he got it. But he said that's not the reason he got a Jag. He said the reason is that his dad drove one as a cop years ago in England, and he took Gary when he was 10 years old on a wild ride, and Gary said, I gotta have one of those cars, so that's why he got it, man. That's cool, man. Every father needs to do that to their son, make him a man. Now, so far, check it out. Here's what he's done. He's replaced all the rusty body panels, he's rebuilt the suspension, upgraded the brakes, and is slowly finishing up the paint and interior. And on a Jag, that's a challenge. Oh yeah, now just in case you think he's gonna modify this thing and put in an LS engine, Gary says forget it. He's doing it original because he got a Jag because he wants a Jag. So to recognize such an awesome project by a guy that's got the balls to take on a Jag, Gary, we're gonna give you one of these bead rollers from Woodward Fab. This is a nice portable bead roller. Comes with a bunch of rollers so that you'll be well on your way to doing some custom panels. Also, you're definitely a gearhead to do a Jag, so we're gonna give you one of our Gearz t-shirts, and we're going to give you one of our project planning books so you can keep track of everything you've done on that car. Then to give the kids something to read, we're going to give you a purple bicycle. And then to give you something to read, we're going to give you a copy of Wheel Hub magazine. Now, for the rest of you guys, if you want to get in on this, get your project featured on the show, you got to send it in to us. Go to the website, go to Gearz Nation, and submit it into What Are You Working On. The website's also the place to find out more information on any products you may have seen on the show, any Gearz merchandise, and how to join Gearz Nation so you can stream any of our episodes commercial free. Finally, don't forget to like us on Facebook so you can get some behind the scenes footage of our weekly web series, Shifting Gears. All right, that wraps it up for us today. Gary's got a Jaguar to go cuss at. I've got a chassis to finish, and I know you got something to work on. So quit wasting time, get out there, start turning wrenches. We'll see you next time.